Mishmash! Kitbash Corner!
Hey, today I got another Space Marine kit bashing video, but it's going to be a little bit different from what we're used to. Throughout the years, we've had several different types of Space Marines come out for each different chapter. There's all kinds of flair and different designs that you can go for. But truly, I don't need anything all that fancy. In today's episode, we're going to be utilizing the brand new bits and bodies from the new Space Wolves box set, as well as some firstborn bits to create the ultimate generic Marines. The amount of armies, especially in the older lore, that had no flair beyond the generic Space Marine portraits is basically what I'm going for. Part of me wanted to kit bash these guys and paint them as 5 different chapters, but I wanted to paint a little squad. In today's video, I painted them up as Mantis Warriors. However, the paint scheme will be something I cover in the Bad Ab War video, and yes, I am still working on it. I'm hoping to get it out by the end of July. But before we get into the meat of this video, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, share with a friend, and if you really dig it, consider becoming a channel member. For just $3 a month, you get to see my videos early, and for $5, you get access to a weekly Q&A stream in which I'll showcase your models. You also get access to exclusive roles and channels within the Mishmash Discord, and above everything else, it just helps me out a ton. Huge thank you to my channel members. You guys are amazing. And if you want to help the channel further by also helping yourself to some awesome products, you can use my affiliate links to Wargames Atlantic, Galleri, and Chronicle Games in the description. You can also use my discount code Mishmash 5% for Wargames and Mishmash for Galleri. But enough of the promotional stuff, I think it's about time we get to the kit bashing. So for our first Marine, I would take one of the bodies from the new Space Wolves Blood Claws kit, and I would begin shaving off basically everything that is Wolfie related. This being the little gem
This being the little gem in the claw.
Or I guess a tooth, it's a tooth. Once I was happy with shaving everything off of the main portion of the power armor, I decided to shave off the little skull from one of the older Space Marine power packs. This is in a bid just to give a little bit of iconography to the power armor, and just to make things look a little less bare. However, compared to some of the other Marines in the set, I don't think this is entirely necessary, though I've done it before in other kit bashes. It does look a little scrungly here, but with paint it actually doesn't look too bad. One thing I really had to look out for when it came to shaving down the chest plates was to not overdo it with the Tamiya cement. It does smooth things out, but if you go too far with it, it can absolutely ruin any detail that you want to keep. I guess I didn't shave off the tooth earlier, apparently I did this now. You'll also notice there are quite a few bullet holes that I added to the power armor. However, this is something I'll go into further detail later on. This is something that I just like doing, and it is entirely optional, but I do think it adds a lot of character. Next for his helmet, I chose one of the new Corvus helmets. And I gotta say, despite not being a huge fan of the little kitty ears that Primaris helms have, I don't really mind it here. Maybe it's just growing on me, I don't know. I then decided to arm him with one of the new bolt carbines, and I actually snipped off some of the iconography for the Space Wolves stuff off camera. I'm a particularly big fan of this one because I love the little lanyard. For this other arm, I decided to take one of the other Space Wolves arms, and I snipped it and gave it a grenade fist. It does look a little weird because it is a firstborn hand, though for whatever reason I just could not find any Primaris hands that actually had grenades. But it's such a minute detail that I highly doubt you would notice unless I mentioned it out loud. After gluing it in place, I was really happy with the pose. It's a great action shot, and after adding in some generic firstborn pauldrons, I was really happy. However, to cap things off with the firstborn look, I decided to give him a firstborn power pack, and I added on some purity seals, just to give a classic Space Marine look. If there's one thing I would do differently, I would probably end up changing his pauldrons to be the full Corvus look with the studded pauldron and the bare pauldron. But, I mean, I don't know. I kind of like mixing and matching the armor anyway. It's one of the elements I liked about the firstborn kits. Though I am not entirely a huge fan of them because of the squat nature, I do like Primaris for that, I still think the amount of options was exactly what I needed. But we got plenty more Marines to build, so let's get to the next figure. For our next battle brother, I decided to use this new pair of arms from the Space Wolves kit as well, and as you can see, I'm snipping away the iconography. This is a reoccurring theme. This pair of arms in particular is one of my favorites in terms of any of the Primaris arms. One thing I did like about the Reavers and Infiltrators is the usage of the actual bolt carbines. However, I like having arms that I really don't need to clip down to actually make them work with basic Marines. I did that plenty for the Bad Eye Boar video, and it's not exactly fun. However, once I glue these pieces in place, everything fits together perfectly. Well, at least in theory. I will say these arms are not meant for this body, but it doesn't matter all too much. For his pauldrons, I decided to go with some of the generic Primaris pauldrons. They are a little bit different from the firstborn, mostly because they don't have the little notches. However, a lot of the new pauldrons for the Space Wolves kits actually do, which is another positive of why I like that kit so much. However, I did want more Baron pauldrons as I do plan on adding in decals, and I've never used them before. For his helmet, I'm using the studded Mark 7 helmet from the new kits as well, and goddamn does he look perfect. However, to add in just a little bit of spice, I did end up giving him a campaign badge. It's a little spicy for our mayonnaise sandwich of a squad here, but I thought it was a pretty cool little detail to add in. I'm always a sucker for campaign badges. I just think they add so much character. For his power pack, again, I'm going with a firstborn one. One thing I don't like about Primaris, and it's very rare that I can ever really get around it, is I've just never been a huge fan of the power packs. I think it mostly stems from the bulbous orb thing on the back that I just don't like. I like when they look more vent-like. I like when they look a little bit more mechanical rather than bowling ballish. Too many soft, curvy surfaces, let's put it like that. However, one thing I don't like about the Firstborn power packs is they are not very fun to clean off in terms of mold lines. Usually I end up having a bunch of chips on the little orbular vents. But, like I stated previously with the other figure, I did decide to drill in some bullet holes. And to do this, I'm using my little mechanical Dremel. You don't need to do this, I just like having this little thing because it's easier. And I've ruined plenty of bolt guns by drilling in too fast. Obviously, if you've seen my other content in terms of Space Marine power armor, you know that I love painting in the chips by hand, but I do think the bullet holes add in just a little bit extra character, and it gives me more things to weather in terms of adding in rust effects. But once he was completely built and painted up, I was left with a great second battle brother. I love how this guy looks, and getting to add in a little bit of extra detail on the campaign badge by utilizing the old Mantis Warrior symbol was something that I really enjoyed doing. I really like how this guy looks overall, and I really like how I really just appreciate how perfectly sculpted he is while still maintaining that Firstborn look. He does have a little bit more of the cleanliness that Primaris Marines still have, which is something that I think a little bit more Firstborn parts would have helped, but I'll be doing that with other figures in the set, so don't worry about that too much. Speaking of which, let's get to the next figure. While I know this is much more a Firstborn thing rather than a Primaris thing, I still like the idea of a squad gunner. To do so, however, I'm actually utilizing one of the Primaris Hellblaster bodies, and for his helmet, I'm using a Firstborn helmet. I decided to use this over one of the newer ones as I kinda wanted to savor it rather than just use all of them at once, and I have plenty of Firstborn helmets regardless. For his armament, I decided to give him a plasma gun, and it does look a little awkward because these are Firstborn arms. However, a little trick that I've done is to kinda glue them down further from his torso, just so he doesn't suffer entirely from T-Rex syndrome. I think the new Firstborn parts from the Horus Heresy lines are a little bit better in terms of proportions for these guys, but I don't know, I don't think it looks too bad, and especially from a tabletop perspective, I don't think anybody would worry about it too much. Though, I'm not really planning to run these guys on the tabletop, this is more of an art piece than anything else. To keep the arms in place, I did end up adding on a little bit of sprue goo just to make sure that they would have a little bit more security when it came to having attachment to the body. One thing I could have done is actually dremeled in some pins just to make sure that they don't pop out, and I really should have, because, well, I'll get into that later. For his pauldrons, I gave him some of the new Space Wolves pauldrons featuring those little notches, and I know they are just a little detail, but they add so much more character in my opinion. I also decided to add on a little bolt pistol and a couple of extra plasma canisters from the Primaris Hellblasters pack. These fit on seamlessly to the Hellblaster bodies, and I don't really mind it overall. I think it's a cool little extra detail. A lot of these figures off camera got little extra armaments and little bolt pistols on their sides. I just like doing this because I think painting leather is fun. But like his first two brothers and the rest of them in the squad, he gets a Firstborn power pack. And with that final detail, this guy is fully complete, and I now have a wonderful plasma gunner. Though I did say that the power packs are one thing that I can't get around when it comes to Primaris, the biggest thing that I've always detested from the new Primaris models is I just hate the replacements for the classic weapons. The new bolt pistols just look weird to me, the new plasma guns are just a little gaudy in my opinion, and not in a good way. It doesn't look like that classic goofiness. Don't get me started on pyre blasters. So stupid. But to keep things a little bit more positive, I'm really happy with how he turned out, and though I do like the new Primaris helmets, there's something about the old firstborns that just have a little bit sharper detail that I love so much. By the way, the reason I said painting things earlier is I dropped this guy and I had to paint his plasma gun like last minute, all because his plasma gun popped off and literally lodged itself into the deepest corner of my hobby area. But I found it, so yay. But now for my squad's second in command, this might be my favorite figure of the bunch. This guy is a gray hunter body, and I shaved down the chest emblem. But as you can see, to kind of differentiate some of the areas, I decided to utilize my Dremel for some more bullet holes. Again, it just adds in a little bit more extra detail and kind of gets rid of some of that blank space. However, to add on to the chest plate, I decided to add in this little grenades pouch from the Reaver's kit. These are some of my favorite bits to add on to Space Marines when I don't know what else to do. It's kind of universal in terms of its placement. You can add it just about anywhere on power armor because it's a curved surface. And if I'm feeling extra creative, it's a great way to paint extra details and colors that contrast with the main power armor. Once that was secure onto the body, I would first arm him with his bolter carbine, and this is from the same kit. For his pauldrons, I decided to use some Corvus pauldrons from the Horus Heresy line. I've got about 1 million of these lying around, so I might as well use them. For his other arm, I decided to give him the pointing hand from the Hellblaster's kit. I like the little extra detail and mechanical bits on the arm, and I'm just a huge fan of the go dat way trope. It's one of my favorite poses for miniatures, especially with him kind of cresting the rock. For the other pauldron as well, it's another Corvus pauldron, though I think I said both pauldrons are Corvus pauldrons at this point. It don't matter, none of this matters. Like with our plasma gunner, I decided to give this guy one of the holstered bolt pistols from the Hellblaster's kit as well. I'm a big fan of these ones in particular because they have so much extra detail compared to a lot of other Space Marine kits. And though there is an unfortunate little gap because these things are supposed to adhere to the thigh plates from the Hellblaster's Marines, I just added in a little bit of sprue goo and it worked. But for his melon, we're continuing the theme by using one of the Primaris Mark 7 helmets. I do appreciate the size. I think that's one thing that I do like about the newer ones. I do still like the firstborn in terms of the sharpness and detail. I do appreciate the resizing. Honestly, it's really not that noticeable, but it's worth noting, so I might as well give it some extra points. And like his previous Battle Brothers, you guessed it, we're adding in a firstborn power pack. I'm really happy with this guy in particular. He still manages to feel like a character model despite just being a rank-and-file tactical marine. This guy is kind of what spawned the idea of doing this as a video, and I had a lot of ideas for how I wanted to paint these guys because when I see this dude, I see 1 million chapters. Marauders, Crimson Fists, old school Blood Angels. It's what really is important when it comes to design philosophy. An impeccable silhouette that poses as a canvas for thousands of different color schemes is what makes a wargame happen. But you have to have people interested in painting that army for it to be fun in the first place. I could get rambly about this topic, but I might save that for a different day. For now, let's get to the last figure, this being the leader, or the sergeant. Now for the sergeant, I really had to shave things down on the chest, as the wolf symbol was just too prevalent to keep. I used my X-Acto knife for this, and I do suggest that you change up your blade. Flat blades actually end up working pretty well for shaving portions of the chest, and having a sharp edge is really good for trimming away the smaller details. However, the key factor is having a good sander at your side. Gundam sanders are a huge lifesaver when it comes to doing this. There's still going to be some remnants of little extra details here and there, but that's something that we can erode over time. A little key factor is going in with little drive-bys. To keep things classic, I decided to use one of the chain swords from the new Space Wolves box, and his other arm would be one from the Space Wolves box, but the pistol was a grav pistol, which is something I was kinda okay with. I've never been a huge fan of grav pistols, but for whatever reason I just couldn't find any plasma pistols. But this is only temporary. I would completely rearm him separately. But after adding in the little detail of the bullet holes, I would add in a Corvus pauldron for his chainsword arm, and for his new weaponry, I would give him the classic Stormbolter, one of the more neglected weapons of the new Primaris era. They're only utilized by Terminators anymore to my knowledge, and that's kind of a crime in my eyes. Stormbolters are objectively cool. If you don't think so, then you have no whimsy in your heart, and I bid you adieu. But do make sure to tell me why I'm wrong in the comments. Also, I just want to mention, to really bait you, I think the Desolation Squad is awesome. You just don't like fun. For a second pauldron, however, I just decided to go basic. It is kind of a weird little mix and match using the Corvus pauldron and the regular Primaris pauldron, but whatever. Off camera, I would actually add on a purity seal to this pauldron, and for his power pack, you guessed it, we're going with the firstborn one. However, you're probably noticing he doesn't have a melon. Well, I decided to add in a melon after the fact by painting on a flesh and blood face. I actually have no memory of what kit this comes from. Maybe it is the Hellblasters kit, I don't remember. Regardless, I picked this one because it just kind of screamed that unhinged level of old 40k to me. Not necessarily the rogue traitor asshole space cop Space Marines, but more akin to old Dawn of War box art. But with that, I am now left with 5 amazing looking Space Marines that are just perfectly generic. Slap any color scheme on these guys, any chapter works, and again, the only reason I painted these guys as Mantis Warriors is because I had the decals. It was either that or more Sons of Medusa. Not that I think you would complain, but I gotta spice it up once in a while. But if you stuck around to the end, I really do appreciate it. Though I got maybe minimal shots of the actual painting process, it was because I painted these guys up in a literal day, so I'm burnt to a crisp. It was a labor of love to get them done, and I like to have fully painted minis for my videos. And yeah, again, if you have a chapter you want to see painted, don't forget to comment that down below. But I've definitely been flapping my beak enough for one video, so if you liked what you saw, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, share it with a friend, and remember to mishmash, kitbash, and paint some fantastic miniatures. And you're gonna. I promise. See ya.